Hello, welcome to Monday, Old Testament Monday, and another week of new stories and hopefully interesting tidbits from the Bible. Welcome. I'm glad you could make it today. So, we're in Genesis. Last week, we talked about the creation of Adam and Eve. God creating them creating Adam out of the dust of the earth. And we're going to skip ahead a little bit. We're going to talk about the next generation. And let me start out by reading just the very beginning of chapter 4, Genesis chapter 4, and this is taken from the New International Version. Chapter 4, verse 1 and verse 2 begin this way. Adam made love to his wife Eve, and she became pregnant, and she gave birth to Cain. She said, "With the help of the Lord, I have brought forth a man." Later, she gave birth to his brother, Abel. Now, Abel, in Hebrew, it's actually pronounced Hebel, but for us, it's spelled Abel. So, Cain and Abel. Let's meet them. Hi. Nope, that doesn't sound right. Hi, I'm Cain. I was the firstborn son. I'm a farmer. Hi, I'm Hewel. I was the second-born son, and I am just a carefree shepherd. I follow the flocks around from place to place. One day, Hebel brought a special offering to God. He brought an offering from one of his sheep, and Genesis tells us it was some portions from the firstborn of his flock, and they were the fatty portions. That's the best kind of meat. Cain, not wanting to be left out, also brought an offering. What do you think he brought? Hi, I brought some of the grain from my harvest. And they both sacrificed to God. Only God really preferred Abel's sacrifice. And he said, I look upon this favorably. Oh, now, what do you think that meant for Cain? Cain looked at Abel and at Abel's offering, and he was disappointed. Actually, Cain was angry. Angry that his younger brother made an offering to God that pleased God more. And God saw this, and he said, dude, Cain, hey, why the long face? If you do what's right, you'll be accepted by me. But don't be a sinner. Don't do something sinful. And I know sin is just crouched there waiting for you. So be good. Why can't you be more like your brother, Abel? How do you think that sat with Cain? Ever had a brother or a sister that seemed to be favored by your parent or by somebody else? So Cain thought about it a little bit, and then he went to his brother, Abel, and he said, hey, Abel, let's go out in the field. And Abel, being such a carefree soul, said, sure, let's go for a walk, big brother. and they went for a walk. Only once when they were in the field, Cain found a rock, and he slammed Abel with it, and he slammed him again, and Abel died. Cain had committed the first murder. Now, what do you think happened then? God, according to Genesis 4, God came looking for Cain. Actually, he came looking for Abel first. And he looked all around and didn't see him. So then God turned to Cain and said, "Hey, big bro, where's your little bro? Where's Abel?" And Cain just said, "Hey, am I my brother's keeper? Not my day to keep track of him, dude." And God looked at Cain and said, "What have you done?" Listen, your brother's blood is crying out to me from the ground. So God knew what had happened. And he was angry. And he said to Cain, "Now you are under a curse. You will be driven from the ground." Which meant that he would no longer be able to make a living doing the thing he knew how to do, which was farm. God said, when you work the ground, when you farm, the land will no longer yield up crops for you. You are going to be a restless wanderer upon the earth. Now, of course, Cain was contrite. Cain said, "Oh, no, come on, man. That punishment is worse. It's more than I can bear. I can't do that. Today you're driving me from the only home I have, and you're taking away my livelihood. I'll be a restless wanderer for the rest of my life, and people are going to know what I did. You drive me away out there, somebody's going to kill me." And God said, "No, not so fast. I will put my mark upon you." Cain, "I'll put my mark upon you so that everybody will know who you are and everybody will know not to touch you. Because if they do, my vengeance will be upon them. They will suffer my vengeance 7 times over." So Cain left, and he began to wander the earth. Well, actually, he wandered kind of next door to a place called the land of Nod, which was east of Eden. And there he found a wife, and she became pregnant and gave birth to a boy named Enoch. And in time, Enoch married and his wife gave birth to a boy named Irad, who in turn was the father of Mehujael, who was the father of Methusael, who was the father of Lamech. And Lamech, he married 2 wives. Their names were Ada and Zillah. And he had a couple of sons. He also had a brother. I'm sorry, the first son had a brother. The first son's name was Jabal, and he was the father of those who live in tents and raise livestock. So he was the first nomad. And then his brother's name was Jubal, and he is considered the father or the ancestor of all who play pipes and stringed instruments. Zillah also had a son named Tubal-Cain. He was the first one who did metalsmithing. Eventually, Lamech killed somebody else, and he was distraught over his sin, mostly because he was afraid of vengeance being carried out against him, just as vengeance would have been carried out against anybody who killed Cain. But we're going to stop there with the story. And we're going to think about what the story is actually telling us. Now, this is one of those early stories that functions on a couple of different levels. The first is just as basically a history. It tells us where murder came from. It tells us where how the first murder was committed. And it sets things up perfectly because it's a murder that's committed because of an argument between two brothers. And that tension between brothers is going to be something that comes up again and again and again throughout the Old Testament. Even into the New Testament, many of Jesus' parables have that tension, at least peripherally. So that's one thing. It kind of sets the stage for stories to come. And part of that possibly has to do with the social arrangements of the time, because the oldest brother was the one who would inherit the most from the father, and then the next oldest would get a smaller portion, and it would continue that way throughout the family line. So I think that tension was probably quite often there because the brothers knew they were in line for different things, and one brother was always going to be getting much more than the others, and that probably set off, a certain degree of arguments and tension. Think of the story of Joseph, and how he got along with his older brothers, or didn't get along with them, as the case might be. So there's that. It's also believed by many biblical scholars that this story serves as an allegory for the creation of cities and civilization. What we think of as civilization today. And in this way of looking at it, the ancient writers were setting up Abel as the representative of the old way of life, the kind of the wanderer that would just follow the flock from here to there and never really put down roots exactly. And Cain was the farmer. He was the guy who was tied to the land. And then later on in Genesis 4, it tells us that Cain began building a city. So when he was no longer, capable of producing crops because he had been cursed, he went and he lived with others who could provide for him, and he directed people in building a city. Because a city was the place where people could come and trade their food for other things, like metal instruments. Or they could come in and hear musicians. There was entertainment there. So Cain was the very, he was the allegorical starting point for civilization. Abel was sort of the ending point for the old way. And if you think of it this way, it's not a history so much as it's an origin story, and it's the writers telling people, okay, this is how it happened. The new way killed off the old way. And the new way brought us cities and metal and musical instruments and all sorts of stuff like that. So it's fascinating from that standpoint. And then the other thing that always comes up when we're talking about Cain, because Cain goes off to the land of Nod and he finds a wife and he has children and sets off this whole chain of events leading to cities. And there's always somebody that says, oh, wait a minute. If Cain and Abel were the two sons of Adam and Adam and Eve were the first people, then who did Cain marry? Does that mean he was marrying one of his sisters that we don't know the name of? And the answer to that, again, according to scholars, is no. Doesn't mean that. Again, because they look at this as an origin story. This tells the story of where the Hebrew people came from. Hebrew people are a special people. Throughout the whole earth, the Bible, the stories of the Bible set them up as a special people who carried, the message from God, who made the covenant with God, who were the vehicle by which Jesus eventually came to earth, thousands of years later. So it's not literally about the first people on earth. It is, in some way, means and methods, it's a story of the first people whose descendants would become the Hebrews. But that meant that there were still other people in the area. And those other people, those other tribes, were whom Cain would have married into. So that answers that question. But to me, it's just a small part. It's one chapter in Genesis. But it's such a pivotal story that you can get a lot out of it when you think about it. And I hope I was able to get some of that across to you today. Cain and Abel is not just a simple story of murder. You just take a step back from it, you take that 1,000-foot look, and it's so much more. It's the story of the tension between, the first hunter-gatherer types, the ones that wandered, and the ones that would eventually found cities and lead to civilization. So that's it for Cain and Abel and for Old Testament Monday. We'll see you back here same time tomorrow, 5 o'clock, for New Testament Tuesday. Stay healthy, stay safe, and we'll see you tomorrow. Have a great night.